covers chapters 1 to 7. The themes in this arc are respect versus fear, the resolve to live for your dreams, and also deceiving appearances. The story starts with chapter 1, where we have a younger version of Luffy. This is pretty much the prologue to the story, in which we learn how Luffy decided to become a pirate. The story starts off with Luffy in the bar with the red-haired pirates led by their captain Shanks. Not too much is going on very early on, just a lot of them picking on Luffy and a lot of joking, until a bandit comes into the bar. The bandit is very upset because there isn't any drinks for him and his men, so Shanks decides to offer the bandit his. At this point, the bandit is so upset and feels like Shanks is disrespecting him, and because of this, he spills his drinks all over Shanks. But, of course, Shanks doesn't do anything. He just sits there, and when the bandit leaves, all of his men laugh about it. But Luffy is very, very upset, saying that Shanks is a despicable person and that he is a laughingstock of pirates. Shanks then explains something very important to Luffy about why unnecessary killing is not something you need to always do, and that when he got older, he'd understand better. After Shanks explains this to Luffy, and before Luffy makes his next move outside of the bar, he ends up finding a fruit on the table, and because Luffy is hungry, he eats this fruit. Now, this is where we first learn of devil fruit, and because Luffy took a big chunk out of this fruit, he actually gets the power of rubber. His body becomes rubber after he eats the Gomu Gomu fruit. The entirety of the pirate crew that is there with Shanks freaks out after Luffy does this, and they explain to him that now he will not be able to swim anymore. After this, Luffy, still upset about what happened earlier with the bandit, decides to go approach him. And because he is completely outmatched due to just the stature difference and him being younger against the older and more dangerous adversary, he ends up in trouble, in which Shanks has to intervene. This is when Lucky Roo catches the first body in One Piece. After this, though, Luffy ends up getting in more trouble as he's about to get chomped up by a Sea King. Once again, Shanks intervenes, saving him, sacrificing his arm, and ushering in the new age of pirates as he sacrificed his arm for Luffy, and also gave his straw hat to him as well. In chapter 2, we start off with Luffy actually at an older age. At this time, a whirlpool comes out of nowhere when Luffy's about to set sail, and he ends up getting washed up. But he finds a pirate ship, in which he ends up getting himself into a barrel. At this point, we meet Koby, a very small child who doesn't seem to be too courageous. And we meet one of our first antagonists in the story, Alvida. Alvida is picking on and beating up on Koby, but Koby seems to be used to this and just walks off, pushing a barrel away for Alvida. At this time, Luffy comes out of the barrel, surprising everyone, beating up some pirates in his wake, and then he escapes with Koby from the ship. At this time in the story, Koby and Luffy start to have a discussion, in which Luffy explains to Koby his dream of being the king of the pirates, and then Koby shares with him his dream of joining the Navy. At this time, Alvida shows back up, and she tries to hit Luffy, but because of his fruits, it doesn't do anything. Doesn't hurt him at all because blunt attacks do not work on rubber. Luffy then bodies Alvida, and him and Koby set sail to a marine base. As I said, they're setting sail for a marine base so Koby can join the Marines, and Luffy wants to recruit Zoro to his crew. They discover the town is feared by a marine captain who rules with an iron fist named Axe Hand Morgans. Luffy and Koby arrive at a town where Zoro was imprisoned and see a little girl bringing him food. We also see the son of Morgan's Helmeppo, who's a spoiled brat and not a good person, and who does as he pleases around the town because people are afraid of his father. Luffy speaks with Zoro about joining his crew, and here we see Zoro stating that he has the resolve to not die because he also has a dream that he wants to accomplish. This is to be the world's strongest swordsman. Luffy later learns that Zoro was arrested for saving the girl from Helmeppo's wolf. Luffy also hears Helmeppo lied about his promise to free Zoro and instead decided to kill him. Luffy punches Helmeppo and decides he wants Zoro to join. Luffy goes to get Zoro's swords. At this point, we get Zoro's flashback, which is a very quick flashback involving him and his partner Kuina. Him and Kuina trained together, and they always had a lot of duels together because both of them had the same dream to become the world's strongest swordsman. At some point, Kuina explains to Zoro that she cannot accomplish this dream because she is a woman and she just can't live up to the physicalities of men. Of course, Zoro does not like this and yells at Kuina, basically telling her that she can be the strongest swordsman. They finally finally have a final duel in which they use real swords, since Zoro loses. Unfortunately, Kuina falls down some steps and she later dies in this flashback. But Zoro takes up her will and decides to live his dream, not only for him, but also for her, and he takes her sword, the Wado Itamaji, with him as well. Back in the current timeline, Zoro and Luffy defeat Morgans, Kobe joins the Marines, and Luffy and Zoro set sail.
Now we are moving on to the second arc in the story, Orange Town, chapters 8 through 21. The theme for this arc is personal treasure. We start off the arc with Luffy and Zoro sailing to the next island. During this, Luffy gets captured and taken away by a giant bird. Zoro then chases after the bird, but stumbles on some random pirates that try to mug him for his ship. They of course fail at this, and Zoro uses them to paddle the boat. The pirates mention that their last ship was taken from them by a girl named Nami, who gets introduced later in the arc. We see in the present time at Orange Town where Luffy has arrived, he meets Nami, who steals a treasure map from a pirate named Buggy the Clown. The two then go on to have a conversation in an abandoned home at Orange Town. During this conversation, Luffy brings up how he got his straw hat and how it is his treasure. Nami also brings up how much she hates pirates but loves money and tangerines. She also mentions that there's a certain village that she wants to buy. After this, Nami tricks Luffy and brings him to Buggy, claiming he is the thief who stole his map. Buggy then tells Nami to kill Luffy if she wants him to join his crew. Nami of course refuses to do this and is then saved by Zoro, who just now arrives.
At this point, we find out Buggy has the Chop Chop Devil Fruit after being attacked by Zoro and realizing that slash attacks won't work. They escape and meet the village chief and a dog named Shushu, who throughout the arc is guarding this pet food store for the owner who passed away. The pet store is a dog's personal treasure, which is also one of the themes mentioned in this arc. Nami discovers Luffy isn't the average evil pirate at this point. The mayor also says the town and its people are his treasure, again recalling the theme that was mentioned earlier. The group goes to confront the Buggy pirates, and this is where Buggy says that treasure is gold and jewels and anything else is meaningless. Luffy's group fights Buggy's crew, Zoro defeats Kabaji, Luffy starts fighting Buggy, and in this conversation he mentions his connections to Shanks. During this fight, Buggy damages the straw hat, which angers Luffy, and he declares that that is his treasure. Buggy flashbacks then starts where we see his and Shanks' ideology on treasure and how he got his powers, and also why he hates Shanks. Luffy goes on to save Nami and defeat Buggy, and the townspeople arrive and chase the group out of the town. The mayor catches up and thanks them, and Nami joins the group. Now we go on to Syrup Village arc, which covers chapters 22 to 41. The themes in this are the boy who cried wolf and the nature of lies, and also real versus fake. The trio arrives to Syrup Village looking for a better ship to sail the Grand Line, and it's also home to the newest addition to the crew, Usopp, the village liar. His introduction starts with him running through the town screaming pirates have arrived, which is a common prank he does to the villagers. The group meets Usopp, and he takes them to a restaurant where he talks about Kaya. Later, the trio find out from the kids that Usopp regularly visits Kaya to tell her stories full of lies. We then see the villain of the arc, Captain Kuro, posing as Kaya's butler, refusing to let her see Usopp because he would be a bad influence on her. Then there's a brief moment where we see Usopp telling a story to Kaya, making her laugh. Hearing about all of this, Luffy comes to the conclusion that Usopp is a good guy. They go to the mansion in hopes to find a boat, but Kuro shows up and insults Usopp's father, Usopp. Usopp declares that he's proud of his father. Luffy and Usopp then talk about Usopp, and we get a brief flashback with Usopp and Luffy. During their conversation, the two see Kuro and Django conspiring to kill Kaya. Luffy gets hypnotized and passes out, while Usopp runs to the village to warn everyone, but unfortunately, no one believes him due to his reputation for always lying, and then he's chased out of town. Usopp then runs to Kaya's mansion to warn her about Kuro's plans, but she also doesn't believe Usopp because Kuro has deceived her into thinking he's an honest man. Kaya still refuses to believe Usopp, saying she loved his lies, but won't tolerate a lie that harms others, and he is shot at by her butler and chased away by the villagers. Usopp later runs into Luffy and the kids where he tells them he lied about Kuro to get back at him for bad-mouthing his father. The kids have the same reaction as Kaya, where they're upset that Usopp is using a lie to hurt someone else. In this moment, Usopp used the lie to keep them from getting involved. Later, Usopp speaks with the others and comes to the conclusion that it's been his years of lying that the villagers don't believe him now. But despite this, he is determined to create a real tale and protect the village from the pirates who will be arriving soon. Luffy's group then agrees to help him.
It is at this point in the arc where Kuro begins to show his true colors by attacking Kaya's other butler, Mary. Over the course of the night, Usopp's group makes preparations for the pirates who have just arrived, but they realize that they set up on the opposite side of the island. Usopp and Nami reach the other side in time, while Luffy got lost along the way, and Zoro falls into the trap they set because of Nami. During their fight with the pirates, Usopp takes a blow to the head, but doesn't stop fighting because he wants the village to believe that he lied, so that they don't have to worry about the pirates. Luffy and Zoro arrive when things start to look bad. Kaya later discovers the truth about Kuro from her butler Mary, and they realize Usopp was telling the truth the whole whole time. The kids figure this out as well. Kaya then arrives to the battle and Kuro reveals his plan. The kids also protect Kaya from Django while Luffy fights Kuro. It is then here we get Kuro's flashback, which also has an appearance from Axe Hand Morgan's. Here we see Kuro is tired of the life as a pirate and goes on to fake his death so that he can have the easy life without having to worry about constantly being chased by the Marines. Back in the present time, Kuro and his men are defeated. Usopp tells Kaya and the kids to keep it all a secret and to lie about the incident. The next morning, the villagers are surprised to not hear from Usopp. Later, Usopp disbands the Usopp Pirates and has decided to set sail. Luffy's group then receives a brand new ship, the Going Merry, from Kaya and has Usopp join the crew as their newest member. As the crew sets sail from the island, we then learn from Kaya's butler Merry about the origin of why Usopp began his pirate lives. This was due to a deep desire that Usopp hoped that one day his dad would return for him. And because of this situation with his parents, he could relate to Kaya's situation and wanted to help her, which led to him telling her all of those stories that were full of lies to get her to laugh.
Next, we entered the BERDASARKAN arc, which covers chapters 42 to 68. Themes in this is taking pride in what you love and your desires, determination and ambition, and then honorable versus dishonorable. The group is sailing, and Luffy wants to test the ship's cannon, which leads to them meeting Johnny and Yasuku, the latter of which is suffering from scurvy. This leads to the group seeking out a chef since they'll be on a long voyage. Yasuku mentions the BERDASARKAN to the crew on where they can find a cook. The crew has a brief encounter with Marine Lieutenant Full Body, who attempts to sink the Going Merry, but he fails, and this results in Luffy repelling the cannon into the BERDASARKAN, damaging the restaurant and injuring head chef Zeph, who tells Luffy that he will work there for a year to repay for the damages. We get the introduction of Sanji, who was working as the assistant chef. He embarrasses Full Body multiple times and then defeats him when he's trying to start trouble. There's more commotion, and we get the introduction of Gin and the mention of the Don Creek Pirates. Gin is kicked out of the restaurant, but Sanji feeds Gin, and Luffy decides he wants Sanji as the ship's cook. Sanji and Zeph get into an argument where Sanji's determined to stay on the BERDASARKAN to repay his debt to Zeph, despite him insulting Sanji and telling him to leave. 2 days later, Don Krieg and his crew arrive, but to everyone's shock, the ship is in shambles. Sanji feeds a starving Don Krieg, who then, right after that, betrays him and plans to take over. He attempts to feed his entire crew, but is stopped by the other employees. Krieg mentions Zeph's history as a pirate and demands that Zeph hand over his logbook about his travels on the Grand Line, since he believes it will better prepare him for a second attempt. Zeph, however, refuses, since the logbook is his pride of him and his men who traveled on the Grand Line together. He still gives Krieg food, despite the complaints of his employees, because he doesn't want them to go hungry like Sanji. After recovering, Krieg's crew begins to attack, but are then attacked by Mihawk, who has had some early foreshadowing this arc. Johnny and Yasuku are in the ocean and tell the others that Nami has stolen the Going Merry ship. Mihawk arrives, and it's mentioned that he is responsible for the situation Krieg and his crew are in, and says he's only doing it to kill some time. Zoro goes to challenge Mihawk, where he is told by the latter that he is basically a big fish in a small pond, since the East Blue is the lamest or the weakest of the four seas. Zoro and Mihawk fight, and Mihawk is impressed with Zoro and lets him live, and he tells him to hone his skills and to surpass him as the world's strongest swordsman. Then asks Luffy about his goal and says it will be harder to achieve than Zoro's. Everyone except Luffy at this point gives chase to Nami. Luffy and Sanji fight Krieg and his men. Zeph is captured, leading to Sanji getting injured from refusing to fight or leave because he blames himself for Zeph losing his dreams and doesn't want him to lose anything else. And this is where we get Sanji's flashback.
Sanji's flashback starts off with a 9-year-old Sanji, where he was on a ship full of cooks talking about the All Blue, the ocean that all chefs dream of, that is home to various fish from each of the four seas. While working on this ship, something that would happen often is that the chefs would eat leftovers from the customers. Sanji did not agree with this and would always throw away the leftovers, saying that there was always plenty of food to eat regardless. Right after this, we see the crew is attacked by a group of pirates led by Red Leg Zeph. They capture all the chefs on the crew, and we notice that one of the pirates begins to steal food. Zeph, of course, does not tolerate this and punishes this pirate for doing such a thing, saying that his #1 rule is that they never lay a finger on their enemy's food. In a brief moment where Sanji tries to stand up for himself against Zeph, a huge storm is underway, and a big wave comes onto the ship and knocks Sanji off of the boat. Zeph immediately reacts to this and saves Sanji, but at the cost of the two being shipwrecked and abandoned on a random rock in the middle of the ocean. The two split their food rations, and Zeph goes to the other side of the rock, telling Sanji not to come over until he sees a ship. It is then here where we get the infamous moment where Zeph removes his leg. We also find out that the two have been on this rock for over 75 days. At this point, Sanji is nearly out of food, with only one moldy piece of bread. Sanji then begins to reflect on his old crew as they ate the leftovers, and this is where Sanji gets the ideology of never wasting food. Starving and out of options, Sanji decides to attack Zeph in order to get his ration of food, believing that he still has food to to share. However, once Sanji cuts open Zeph's bag, it is not food that he finds, but just a lot of gold. It is then here that Sanji realizes Zeph gave Sanji all of the food to begin with and never had any to share. Not only did we find out that Zeph gave Sanji all of the food, but the moment when he removed his leg, that was the food that he used over the course of those 75 days. Sanji is begging to him, asking him why did he do all of this, and Zeph tells him it is because they share the same dream of one day finding the All Blue. Finally, on the 85th day of being stranded, a ship finally finds the two, and then we fade back into the present. Luffy and Sanji defeat Krieg and his crew. Gin then takes Krieg and leaves with the others, and at the end of the arc, Zeph and the others devise a plan to get Sanji to go with Luffy. Sanji then leaves with Luffy and Yosaku, who has returned, and Sanji, as they depart, bows to Zeph and thanks him, and the crew leave.
Now we move on to Arlong Park, which covers chapters 69 to 95. Themes in this are elitism, trust, greed, and corruption of money. The arc starts with Luffy, Sanji, and Yosaku heading towards Arlong Park. In this conversation, Yosaku mentions the Fishman Pirates and their leader Jinbei. He also mentions the Seven Warlord system and that Mihawk has a connection to it, and that Jinbei was responsible for letting Arlong loose in the East Blue. We cut to Arlong Park and see Arlong himself dealing with a shady marine officer called Nezumi. Nami stops the kid from getting himself killed by trying to challenge Arlong. We then see that Nami was revealed to be a member of the Arlong Pirates the whole time. Zoro, Usopp, and Johnny arrived to the island first. Zoro was abandoned by the two and captured by the Arlong Pirates. Usopp and Johnny arrive at the destroyed town and run into Nami's sister Nojiko. Nojiko talks with Usopp and Nami. Zoro was brought to Arlong Park, where he questions Nami's loyalty to Arlong and drowns himself. Nami saves Zoro. Then, Arlong arrives at the Kokiashi village. Here we see Arlong enforces attacks and certain rules on the community of the island, and failure to follow these things leads to their death. Throughout the arc, Arlong also makes multiple comments about the superiority of the Fishman race. At this point, Zoro leaves Arlong's headquarters. Nami goes to Bellamir's grave and mentions, "This is the island that you spoke about wanting to buy." Usopp saves the mayor but is captured by Arlong, then his death is faked by Nami. The rest of the group meet Nojiko after a brief encounter with Nami. This is where Nami's flashback happens.
We start the flashback off with Nami, who was caught by the village mayor for stealing a book from the town bookstore. As Nami explains, it is because her family is poor. She's then brought to her home, where we see Nami's adoptive mother, Bellamere. Here we see Nami has had her dream of wanting to make a map of the world ever since she was a kid. Nami's family was very poor growing up, so this led to them never having much food for all three of them to eat, as well as Nami receiving her clothes from her older sister Nojiko growing up, which is something she always hated. Nami and Nojiko then have an argument about this, as Nami says it doesn't matter because they aren't real siblings to begin with. Hearing this upsets Bellamere, causing her and Nami to then get into an argument. Then Nami runs away, and Bellamere, who regrets the argument, tells Nojiko to bring Nami home. Nami goes to the town mayor, and here we learn about the day Bellamere took the two girls in, and about how Nami learns that family is more important than being blood related. Nojiko soon arrives to bring Nami home, but immediately after this, the Arlong Pirates arrive to the village for the very first time and claim the island under their control. After checking how many people live in the town, they begin to leave, but then see smoke coming from Bellamere's home and then make their way there next. They arrive at the home, where Bellamere takes Arlong by surprise and pins him down. This doesn't last long, of course, as Arlong soon takes advantage of the situation as Nami and Nojiko arrive to see their mother in trouble. The fishermen discover that more than one person is staying at the home, and the mayor tries to cover for this, but Bellamere tells them the truth and admits that she will not be paying the tax that Arlong has placed on the citizens. Bellamere gives her final words to Nami and Nojiko and is then killed by Arlong. Right after this, the fishermen take Nami away after discovering that she has a talent for drawing maps. Later, the townspeople plan to fight the pirates and save Nami, only to be shocked by the news that she has decided to join the fishermen to make money. The flashback ends with the two sisters talking in front of Bellamere's grave, where Nami tells Nojiko that she'll fight this battle alone in order to buy back the island.
Back in the current timeline, the Marines arrive at Nami's home to take the treasure she's been gathering and the money she's collected over the last 8 years. She discovers it was Arlong who tipped them off. Nami confronts Arlong to find out he has gone back on their deal, making all of her sacrifices and efforts be in vain. The villagers are prepared to attack Arlong for everything he's done to Nami. Seeing this, Nami tries to stop them, but fails and begins to cry while stabbing her tattoo. Luffy arrives to put his hat on Nami, and this is where the Nami help me moment happens. The Straw Hats arrive at Arlong Park to fight the fishmen at this point. There's big moments for everyone, especially Usopp, who had to talk himself into stepping up to lighten the burden for his friends. Luffy defeats Arlong and destroys the tower Nami was forced to work in for the last 8 years, destroying the symbol of her suffering and trauma. Corrupt Marines are dealt with, Nami changes her tattoo, and leaves with the crew to set sail for the Grand Line.
Now we are entering the final arc of the East Blue Saga, Logtown, chapters 96 to chapter 100. The themes of this arc are fate, destiny, inherited will, and achieving one's dreams. This is the arc where the East Blue crew are fully assembled and now begin to make their way to the Grand Line. line. But first, they decide to stop at a town called Logtown, the town of the beginning and the end, where the Pirate King Goldie Roger was born and executed. It is also the location of where the Great Pirate Age began. On the way to this island, we discover that Luffy has finally acquired his first bounty of 30 million berries. After seeing Luffy's bounty, they see Logtown in the distance and decide to go there once Nami tells Luffy about his connections to Roger. After arriving, the crew separates to collect materials, Usopp goes to gather equipment, Sanji cooking ingredients, Zoro goes to look for new swords, while Luffy visits the execution platform where Roger was executed. We also get a brief moment where we see Mihawk and Shanks encounter each other on a random island, where he informs Shanks of Luffy's bounty, and then seeing this news, Shanks' crew begins to celebrate. Back at Fuchsia Village, the mayor is also talking about Luffy's fate and destiny, the themes related to this arc. Back at Logtown, Zoro meets Tashigi, a member of the Marines, who reminds him of his childhood friend Kuina. They talk at the sword shop where Zoro acquires 2 new cursed blades, the Sandai Kitetsu and the Yubashiri. It is also this moment from Tashigi where we learn about the different made-so-great swords in the world. Luffy arrives at the execution platform where he meets both Alvida and Buggy for a second time, the latter who captures him and is about to execute him on the platform. In this moment, Luffy declares that he will be the Pirate King, and then has a smile on his face right before he is about to be executed by Buggy. It is then that lightning strikes the platform and he is saved. The crew then begin to make their escape from Logtown. We get a brief moment with Zoro versus Tashigi. He tells her he doesn't like her because she is too similar to Kuina from both her looks and the things she is saying. Smoker then captures Luffy, but he is soon saved by a man named Dragon, following a huge windstorm that blows through the town as the Straw Hats escape. After escaping and returning to the ship, the crew gather together, each declaring their dreams as they set sail for the Grand Line. It is at this point where we have reached the end of the East Blue Saga. Now we are starting off with the Alabasta Saga, and here we are starting off with its first arc, Reverse Mountain. This is the first arc after the crew enters the Grand Line and their first obstacle on their journey. Before arriving at Reverse Mountain, the crew finds themselves entering the Calm Belt, which is home to the Sea Kings. After escaping, they head to the entrance of the Grand Line, this mountain which is known for having several entrances that lead into the Grand Line, connecting from each of the 4 seas. This is the first example of an insane landscape that we get to see throughout the story. After narrowly getting past Reverse Mountain, the crew arrive at the Twin Capes and immediately encounter a whale known as Laboon and get swallowed by him with the exception of Luffy. They stumble onto a house inside of the whale owned by a man named Crocus, who tells the crew that Laboon is smashing his head against the Red Line. We then get the introduction of 2 characters named Miss Wednesday and Mr. Nine who attempt to kill Laboon. Later, Crocus talks about Laboon's past and how he's been waiting for his friends over the last 50 years and his reason for hitting his head against the Red Line, which is the cause for the scars on Laboon's head. After hearing this, Luffy challenges Laboon. They come to a tie and he tells the whale that they'll meet again to settle the score, which makes Laboon happy. Crocus gives Nami a log post and explains how to use it and how traveling on the Grand Line works. At the end of the arc, Crocus also names the final island on the Grand Line Rattail, stating that only the Pirate King's crew has been to this location, hinting that this is where the One Piece is located. Miss Wednesday and Mr. Nine return and beg the Straw Hats to take them to their town, Whiskey Peak. As the crew departs, Crocus has some interesting dialogue where he says that the Straw Hats might be the pirates that they have been waiting for, and how Luffy has a mysterious aura about him. As he is saying this, he is monologuing to Roger, the king of the pirates.
Next up, we are at Whiskey Peak, which covers chapters 106 to 114. The crew arrive to Whiskey Peak, which is an island full of people who initially come off as friendly to the crew, serving them food and drinks, but they later find out that are criminals who set up anyone who arrives to the Grand Line. These people are all members of Baroque Works, and they plan to collect the bounty on Luffy's head. Zoro faces off against the group alone, 1 versus 100, and of course, he wins. Baroque Works agents Mr. 5 and Miss Valentine arrive and reveal Vivi's identity as the princess of the Kingdom of Alabasta. They cause some trouble, then an angry Luffy arrives to fight Zoro for harming the citizens, unaware of their real intentions. They fight and pay no mind to Mr. 5 and Miss Valentine, which was hilarious by the way, but Nami stops the fight. They talk to Vivi about helping her and then reveal that Crocodile, one of the 7 warlords, is the one in charge of Baroque Works. Vivi joins the Straw Hats. Ikarim is seemingly killed by Miss Al Sunday, who is Nico Robin. The group sets sail to Little Garden.
Now we have arrived to the second island that the crew enters on the Grand Line, Little Garden, chapters 115 to 129. After arriving to the island, Luffy and Vivi explore it, while Zoro and Sanji compete for who can find bigger game across the island for food in order to help them on their travels, while Usopp and Nami stay on the ship. As the arc goes on, they meet 2 giants from the land of Elbaf, home to the land of the giants, named Dory and Bragi, who we find out have been in battle over the last 50 years over an argument which they can't seem to remember. After witnessing the giants in action, Usopp idolizes the 2 warriors and wants to be a brave warrior of the seas like them, which fits along with his dreams. As the battle continues, we find out that their battle is sabotaged due to Mr. 3 and other members of Baroque Works, who have arrived on the island chasing after the Straw Hats and now plan to capture the giants themselves. As all of this is going on, we find out that Sanji is talking on a Dindin Mushi with Crocodile, one of the 7 warlords, the head of Baroque Works. As they're talking over the Dindin Mushi, Crocodile is under the impression that he is talking to Mr. 3. After discovering some important information, Luffy and the crew defeat Mr. 3 and the members of Baroque Works. As they depart the island, they are saved from a giant fish that attempts to eat them by Dory and Bragi. The arc ends with Nami collapsing from an illness.
Now we move on to Drum Island, which covers chapters 130 through 154. Nami gets sick and collapses as mentioned earlier, so the crew prioritize looking for a doctor over immediately going to Alabasta. The crew runs into Wapol on the way to Drum Island, and of course they beat him. He's a bum. They arrive to Drum Island and beg for the citizens' help. They meet Dalton, a former soldier for Wapol, who informs them of Dr. Correa, a person they can go to help with Nami's sickness. Dalton also mentions that Wapol was the one who ruled Drum Island and was a horrible king who fled the country because of an attack by the Blackbeard pirates. At some points, Luffy climbs up a mountain carrying Nami and Sanji and soon meet both Dr. Correa and a reindeer named Chopper. Dr. Correa mentions that Chopper has some trust issues, and then we enter Chopper's flashback. Enter Chopper's flashback, chapter 141 to 145. We enter Chopper's flashback with the introduction of Dr. Hiraluk, a doctor who was infamous and feared for testing his experimental medicine on the town's citizens in order to help them, but they always backfired. One day, Hiraluk meets an injured Chopper and adopts him. We find out Hiraluk's goal was to cure the illness in the hearts of the kingdom and believed it to be cherry blossoms. 1 year later, after fully recovering, Chopper is then kicked out of their home by Hiraluk. Later, we see this was a part of Hiraluk's plan to bring the cherry blossoms to the Winter Island for Chopper to see before he dies of an illness. Without him knowing, Chopper secretly searched for an ingredient needed to help so that he can live, overcoming obstacles along the way. After taking the medicine made by Chopper, Hiraluk leaves to beg Correa to teach Chopper to be a doctor since he doesn't have long to live. Hiraluk then heads for Wapol's castle when we find out that the mushroom he received from Chopper was actually poison and realize that Hiraluk lied to him about his condition. Hiraluk arrives to Wapol's castle to cure the sick doctors, only to discover it was a trap set for him by Wapol. We get the infamous speech from Hiraluk about a man only dies when he is forgotten, and he blows himself up just as Chopper arrives. The reindeer soon escapes with the help of Dalton and goes to Correa, begging her to teach him to become a doctor so he can cure all diseases. The flashback ends. Wapol eventually returns to the castle, and Luffy, of course, defeats him. Chopper joins the crew, and as they depart, he witnesses the cherry blossom blooming all over the island. The crew now sets sail for Alabasta. At the end of the arc, we see a mysterious man named Ace, who arrives several days prior telling a citizen to pass on a message to Luffy about meeting him in Alabasta, and Correa comments that the Will of D is still alive.
Now we have arrived at the culmination of everything since the Reverse Mountain arc, Alabasta, chapters 155 to 207. The themes of this arc are friendship and sacrifice, as the final antagonist of this arc is Crocodile, who is originally believed to be the hero by the citizens of Alabasta, when really he has been the one pulling the strings, leading the country to having an oncoming civil war. Before arriving to Alabasta, the crew briefly encounter Bon Clay, aka Mr. 2 of Baroque Works, who has the powers of the copy fruit, turning into each of the Straw Hats, as well as the king of Alabasta, Vivi's father. Bon Clay then leaves, saying the time they spent together has no bearing on true friendship, one of the core themes of this arc as well as the entire saga. As he departs, the crew realizes that he is Mr. 2 of Baroque Works. Noticing Mr. 2's abilities could pose a threat in the future, the group decides to come up with a plan for this by wrapping bandages around each of their left arms, which we later find out is an X-shaped mark meant to be the mark of their friendship. Again, one of the core themes of Alabasta. They do this so that they are not fooled by his powers in the future. After the group docks on Alabasta, they begin to make their way across the island. They soon encounter Smoker, who has arrived to capture Luffy. They also meet Luffy's older brother, Porcus D. Ace, who saves the crew from the Marines. In the middle of all this, we also get the first mention of the Whitebeard Pirates. After escaping, the Straw Hats meet Ace, who then asks them to join the Whitebeard Pirates, but of course, Luffy refuses this, which Ace had already expected. He then tells them he came to Alabasta in search of Blackbeard, then gives Luffy a piece of paper that says it will reunite them in the future, and then he leaves.
The crew makes their way to the City of Dreams, the rain base where Crocodile is located. After arriving in the city, they are all soon captured in the basement of the casino along with a Smoker who chased after the crew. Not long after, the crew is soon rescued by Sanji, who defeats all of the Crocodile pets. After escaping their cell, Smoker lets the Straw Hats go as a way to return the favor for saving him. The crew then makes their way to Alabasta's capital city, Alubarna, to stop the civil war that is about to take place. Crocodile tries to stop them, which leads to a battle between Luffy and him so that the others can get away. Luffy sees that he can't touch Crocodile and loses the fight after getting impaled and left to die. Not long after, his life is saved by Miss All Sunday. Back at the capital, the Straw Hats fail to prevent the Civil War from starting and find themselves in battle against the agents of Baroque Works. While the crew is in battle, Crocodile takes out the palace guards and asks the king of the location of Pluton, a battleship capable of destroying islands. As the situation gets worse, Crocodile is about to kill Vivi, who was then saved by Luffy. Luffy reveals that he has figured out Crocodile's weakness, which is water, and now he can hit him, but he loses a second time. After this, Crocodile has King Cobra bring him and Miss Sunday to the location of the item called the Poneglyph, a stone inscribed in an ancient language that is supposed to reveal the location of Pluton. Miss All Sunday, whose name is Nico Robin, says that the Poneglyph doesn't tell anything about the ancient weapon, which leads to Crocodile betraying Robin now that he no longer has a use for her. Luffy arrives immediately after to the location and the final battle between them begins, except this time Luffy is the victor in this final encounter, using his blood to make physical contact with Crocodile. After his defeat, Crocodile is arrested by the Marines. Luffy gets an increase in his bounty to 100 million, while Zoro gets a bounty of 60 million. The world government promotes Smoker for the defeat of Crocodile to cover up the fact that another pirate fixed their problems for them. As the crew departs the island, they are attacked by Marines led by Captain Hina, and Bon Clay sacrifices himself to allow the Straw Hats to get away. Vivi decides to stay behind in her country, giving up on the chance to go out to adventure the sea with the Straw Hats. The crew says goodbye in silence by raising their marked arms as a sign of their friendship. Now we move on to the Jaya arc, the setup arc to Skypiea, and that covers chapters 218 to 236. The themes for this are faith and belief. The arc starts off after the crew departs from Alabasta and find former Baroque Works agent Nico Robin becoming a new member of the crew, and not long after this, witness a ship falling from the sky that nearly falls on them. With this, we get the first mention of the existence of Sky Islands. They acquire a map of Skypiea and meet the Masara pirates. They see giant silhouettes in the sky and run away, eventually arriving at the island Jaya. They arrive at Mocktown and meet several individuals who we find out later are members of the Blackbeard pirates. Luffy, Zoro, and Nami go to a bar where Luffy is about to fight Blackbeard. Later, Bellamy arrives and the trio are laughed at for believing in a Sky Island and mocked for the idea of people having dreams. Luffy and Zoro get beat up, refusing to fight back. This is when Blackbeard gives a speech about dreams never dying to Luffy. After this, they meet an ancestor of Nolan the Liar named Mont Black. Bellamy later shows up to take Mont Black's gold from him. Luffy goes to fight Bellamy, defeats him very easily, and takes the gold back, and then tells Bellamy's men that he's going to the sky. We get brief scenes of Ace encountering Buggy, more Whitebeard lore, and we see the debut of the Gorosei, and also Sengoku, Doflamingo, and Kuma, where they discuss the situation with Crocodile. We also get the debut of Whitebeard, who we are told is going to be meeting Shanks soon. Blackbeard pirates gather together to go capture the Straw Hats to claim Luffy and Zoro's bounty, but before they can catch up, the Straw Hats are sent to Skypiea via the Knock-Up Stream.
After taking the knock-up stream towards the sky, the crew arrives to witness a sea of clouds and are attacked by a mysterious figure, but then saved by a sky knight named Dawnfall. Later, after arriving at Skypiea, they meet Pagaya and Conus, who demonstrate and explain some of their technology such as dials and the Waver. They also explain how Sky Islands are created. During all of this, Nami explores the Sky Realm on the Waver and soon finds an island called Upper Yard, the land where God lives. It is here we witness a man being murdered by the major antagonist of the arc, God Enel, who is a native from another Sky Island that he destroyed and has eaten the Goro Goro no Mi, a low-gear fruit giving him the powers of electricity. He also possesses an ability called Mantra that allows the user to sense the presence of others.
We learn that everyone lives in fear of the self-proclaimed God over the last 6 years. The crew discovers they have entered the Sky territory illegally and will be punished for this, with half of the crew forcibly taken to the Upper Yard, except for Luffy, Sanji, and Usopp, who receive help from the Sky Knight Dawnfall, who we later learn was the previous god of Skypiea. Luffy arrives at the Upper Yard to rescue their friends, but they encounter and defeat one of Enel's subordinates named Satori. We discover that the Upper Yard was at one point part of the island Jaya long ago, but it was shot up by a knock-up stream and is where the City of Gold in Nolan's story resides. The crew then reunites and decide to find that lost city. Enel then starts a survival game between the Straw Hats, his forces, and the Shandian tribe, who are trying to reclaim Upper Yard because it is their homeland. During this death game, Usopp and Sanji are defeated by Enel, but both Wiper and Enel's forces are also taken out. As the fighting goes on, we discover Enel's plan to wipe out the citizens of the Sky Island. This leads to a 4v1 battle at the Golden City Shandora with Enel versus Zoro, Robin, Gonfall, and Wiper, the leader of the Shandora tribe. During all of this, Luffy is swallowed by the giant snake. Enel quickly defeats everyone and leaves with Nami, who decides to follow him, where we see this giant ship known as the Ark Maxim. This is a giant flying ship he made from the gold of the Lost City. Luffy arrives to fight Enel and they begin their battle. Much to Enel's shock, he can't harm Luffy because of his body being made of rubber. Luffy gets knocked off the Maxim and stuck to a giant golden ball, but continues to make his way back up to Enel's ship. Nolan flashback occurs at this point, and it's covered from chapters 286 to 292. It's in this flashback where we see the true history of Nolan the Liar and discover his story to be entirely true, and that he had a relationship with the Shandorian tribe of the past. Back in the present, Luffy defeats Enel and rings the golden bell for everyone to hear. Robin then finds a poneglyph which reveals the location of the ancient weapon Poseidon and sees a message left by Roger. The crew then departs Skypiea with a lot of gold. So now that we're done with the Alabasta saga, we move on to the Water 7 saga. Since Long Ring Long Land is pretty short, we've combined it with Water 7. This is covering chapters 303 to 374. The themes in Water 7 are amongst kind of the same as in the last Alabasta arc, a lot of friendship, trust, and reliability. The crew arrives to an island and they meet Foxy, where they learn about Davy Back fights. They are challenged by Foxy with the crew on the line, and if they lose, they must join the Foxy Pirates. Luffy defeats Foxy at the end of the arc, and we get the introduction of the first admiral we see in the story, Aokiji. He defeats the monster trio very easily, and he warns them that they cannot trust Robin since she is a threat to the world who can read the ancient poneglyphs. Aokiji allows the Straw Hats to leave, and they eventually discover their ship is in need of repairs, so they make their way to the shipbuilding island known as Water 7, home to the best shipwrights in the One Piece world. The crew splits up. Zoro stays on the ship though. Luffy, Nami, and Usopp go to exchange their gold for money to fix the ship. Robin comes across a mysterious figure who mentions CP9, then disappears with this person. Luffy and Nami learn that the Going Merry is unfixable due to the ship's keel being damaged. During this, Usopp is attacked by the Frankie family and robbed, losing 200 of the 300 million the crew earned from trading in their gold. After learning about what happened, Luffy, Zoro, Sanji, and Chopper attack the Frankie family and destroy their base. Frankie at this time was out of town with the money.
Later, Luffy informs the crew that they will be acquiring a new ship and that it is time to part ways with the Going Merry. Hearing this news, Usopp gets angry and doesn't agree with this. He and Luffy have an argument and then later come to decide to have a duel. Usopp of course loses this duel and leaves the crew because he doesn't want to part with the ship. The next day, the crew learned that the mayor of Water 7, known as Iceberg, was shot in the previous night by Nico Robin. If things didn't seem bad enough, during all of this commotion, we also learned that something called the Aqua Laguna, a giant tidal wave, will be approaching the town very soon. When trying to find Robin, we discovered several residents of Water 7 were secretly members of CP9, a secret government organization. Their mission on Water 7 was to find the blueprints to the ancient weapon Pluton, mentioned all the way back in Alabasta, as well as capturing Robin and bringing her to Annie's lobby, since she can read the ancient language. It is discovered that Frankie holds the blueprints that they are looking for. When attempting to find Robin, CP9 defeats Luffy, Zoro, and Nami, capturing both Frankie and Robin, and depart for Annie's lobby. Giving chase to save the others, Sanji and Usopp board the train and free Frankie, who is later captured again. They go to rescue Robin, with Luffy's group giving chase via a second train. Now we move to the second half of the Water 7 saga, Annie's lobby, chapters 375 to 430. We arrive at Annie's lobby where we see Spandam, the head of CP9, and the remaining CP9 members. Luffy's group soon arrives and attacks the base, where Luffy makes it all the way to the Tower of Justice, where he reveals his new Gear 2nd form, quickly defeating one of the CP9 members known as Bluno. After defeating Bluno, he calls for Robin. All of the Straw Hats gather together, and Luffy tells Usopp to shoot down the world government flag, which signals Luffy declaring war against the government as well as the whole world for the sake of his friends. After witnessing this, we then go into the Robin flashback, where we learn about her past and her trauma with the world government and everything she has gone through her entire life. We learn about what happened to her hometown of Ohara, what happened to her mother, and the crimes for knowing how to read the ancient language. Back in the present, Luffy screams to Robin, asking her that they will help if she just says that she wants to live. And then we get the infamous I want to live moment from Robin. After hearing this, the crew begin to make their way to go and rescue their friend. They break into the tower and challenge the members of CP9, with most of them displaying some form of a new power-up. During all of this, Spandam accidentally summons a bird Buster Call, which is 10 battleships and 5 Navy Marines, all coming to destroy whatever location the Buster Call was called for, which forces them to speed things along with the capture of Robin, now that all of these Marine battleships will soon be approaching Enies lobby to destroy it.
After this, the Straw Hats hold off the Buster Call while Luffy is in the climax of his fight with Lucci. Luffy defeats Lucci, and they hear a voice telling them to jump into the ocean, where they see the Merry waiting for them, and they escape. After escaping, the Merry breaks and the crew say goodbye to their ship, returning to Water 7. They learn from Frankie that he used their money to purchase wood from the Atom Tree to create a powerful ship and give it to the Straw Hats to fulfill his dream of making a ship that can sail the entire world. All the Straw Hats receive new bounties. Now we move on to a very short post-Enies lobby arc, which covers chapters 431 to 440. In this, they learn from Frankie that he used the money to purchase wood, and he makes a powerful ship for them. We also get the reveal of Garp, information about Dragon, Shanks, the Yonko, and Vegapunk. And Luffy reunites with Kobe as well. Also, Frankie joins the crew, Usopp apologizes and rejoins as they leave Water 7 and escape Garp. Shanks and Whitebeard finally meet, and Ace versus Blackbeard occurs. Now that we're done with the Sky Island saga, we finally move on to the Thriller Bark saga, which is a one-arc saga consisting of chapters 442 to 489. Themes in this are loneliness. Examples of this is Brook alone on the ship for 50 years, Laboon's reference about being alone, Moria losing his crew and deciding to use zombies, Absalom desperately wanting a wife, Moria foreshadowing that Luffy will lose everything. After the crew embark from Water 7 with the return of Robin and Usopp and their newest member Frankie, we start with them making their way to their next destination, Fishman Island. While sailing, they're enjoying the features of their brand new ship, the Thousand Sunny, and soon stumble onto a barrel in the ocean. They bring the barrel on board and are curious about what's inside, so they decide to open it. Much to their confusion, a red flare shoots out of this barrel, but they don't have much time to think about this because Nami says a storm will be reaching them soon. They escape the storm, but find they are surrounded by some fog and realize that they have entered the Florian Triangle, a place shrouded in mystery and where any ship that goes in will disappear. Here, they stumble onto an old ghost ship and they meet a talking skeleton named Brook. We find out that Brook is a skeleton because he has eaten the Yomi Yomi no Mi, a devil fruit that gives the user a second chance at life. We also learn more about Brook's situation, like why he's a skeleton, why he's on the ship to begin with. After a few brief gags, Luffy immediately asks Brook to join the crew. Brook unfortunately declines the offer. He wishes he could join because, as he says, he's been alone for a long time. So lonely and so scared that he wanted to die. He says that the reason he can't join is because he needs to get his shadow back that was stolen from him by the main antagonist of this arc, who we later find out to be Gecko Moria, another warlord of the sea. The reason Brook needs his shadow back is because if he were to step out on the sunlight without it, then he would turn into ash. The crew soon discovers that they have sailed into a trap set for them due to the opening of the barrel previously mentioned, and they arrive on the ghost island, Thriller Bark. Thriller Bark is an island that wanders the sea. Brook sees this as a chance to reclaim his shadow and head towards the island by running into water. He can do this because he is very light due to being a skeleton. Luffy, who wants Brook to join, decides the crew will embark into Thriller Bark to help him, as well as adventure the island. The first group who travels the island is Nami, Usopp, and Chopper, who get into some trouble with zombies along the way, and they meet a man by the name of Dr. Hogback, a genius surgeon who Chopper had high respect for until discovering what he had been doing with his research.
Meanwhile, the remaining Straw Hats now land on the island and discover Moria is responsible for everything that is going on. So Luffy, being Luffy of course, decides that he will beat up Moria and take Brook's shadow back, so that he can get him to join their crew. While traversing through the castle, the monster trio of Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji, including Robin actually, get their shadows captured by Moria. And in the middle of all of this, Nami is kidnapped by one of Moria's subordinates, Absalom, who plans to marry Nami and make her his wife. Going back to Luffy, he has his shadow put into a corpse of an ancient giant named Ors. We find out this is a part of Gecko Moria's plans to take on one of the 4 emperors of the sea, Kaido, who he had a brief encounter with in the past at some point. Later into the arc, Brook returns and we find out the weakness to Moria's zombies is salt. We also learn from Brook that he was a part of the crew that promised to return to Laboon one day, but never got to fulfill that promise. After returning to the Sunny, Luffy hears this story from Frankie and Robin, and after hearing about Brook's connection to Laboon, Luffy is even more determined to make Brook a member of their crew. So the crew makes a plan to return to the island to go save Nami, help Brook, and get back all of the stolen shadows. Then, as things progress, the Straw Hats find themselves ending up in a battle with Moria's top generals. We have Usopp, who battles Perona and wins. We have Zoro, who goes on to save Brook from one of Moria's zombies, Ryuma, a corpse of a samurai from the land of Wano. Brook defeats Ryuma and gains a new sword named Shishui. And then we have Sanji versus Absalom in the attempt to save Nami. Throughout this arc, we learn that Moria is a very lazy individual who will rather take the easy route to things, and that he has an army of zombies because something happened to him in the past that involved him losing his crew after a confrontation with the Yonko of the Sea, Kaido. The Straw Hats minus Luffy all gather together to fight against Oars, who has Luffy's shadow and actually his personality. Luffy later arrives and defeats Moria, returning everyone's lost shadows just before the sun rises. However, before things can begin to calm down, Kuma, another warlord of the sea, then reveals himself and defeats everyone. The last person who is left standing is Zoro. Kuma and Zoro make a deal that will save Luffy's life, and then we get the infamous nothing happened moment from Zoro. At the end of the arc, we learn that Moria escapes, and we learn that Ace, Luffy's brother, has been incarcerated in a prison called Impel Down after losing his fight against Blackbeard. In chapters 487 to 488, we get to see Brook's flashback that shows his history with Laboon, all the way up to him on the ghost ship in the Florian Triangle. Back to the present, the crew then rest and celebrate their victory. Brook joins the crew. The Straw Hats are then given a Viva card by Lola, saying it will guide them to her mother, who also happens to be a pirate. And then if things couldn't get more interesting with the Viva cards, Lola also notices that the Viva card Luffy received from Ace is burning, and that it means a bad sign. However, Luffy doesn't think much of this because he believes Ace can handle himself and wouldn't want his little brother to come and save him. And with this, the crew moves on from Thriller Bark, and then we go into the next saga.
Next up, we enter the Summit Wars saga. Themes in this saga are family bonds, what it means to be a family, and also what it means to have love for your family. For example, Luffy losing his crew at Sabaody, Ace's inner turmoil with his hatred for Roger, or things like Garp's inner turmoil with Ace and Luffy during the war. The first arc in this saga is Sabaody, which covers chapters 490 to 513. The crew arrive on the final island of the first half of the Grand Line in order to get their ship coded so that they may go to Fishman Island. At some point, the crew meets Silver's Rayleigh, the right-hand man of the Pirate King. During this arc, they reunite with Hachi and meet a mermaid named Cammy, who is captured and to be sold at a slave auction. They go to save her, and during this, Hachi is shot by a celestial dragon, a member of the group who are the descendants of the original 20 families that created the world government and the current rulers of the One Piece world. Luffy punches the celestial dragon that shot Hachi, which leads to the world government sending an admiral named Kizaru with the Pika Pika no Mi, a Logia fruit that turns his body into light, to come and capture Luffy. We also get the first mentions and appearances of the members of the Supernovas, 11 rookie pirates including Luffy and Zoro, who have bounties over 100 million. They all fight against the Marines while trying to escape the island. Luffy and his crew find themselves outmatched against Kizaru, Sentamaru, and the Pacifista, which is a robot version of Kuma. They are all saved by Rayleigh, but then separated by Kuma across different parts of the world. This is when the Straw Hats face their first major defeat.
After moving on from Sabaody, we now go on to the arc of Amazon Lily, chapters 514 to 524. After his defeat at Sabaody and being sent away by Kuma, the location Luffy lands on resides in the calm belt Amazon Lily. This island is the home of the Kuja tribe, a female-only warrior civilization ruled by the pirate empress Boa Hancock. After some time here, Luffy encounters Hancock, who has him on trial by combat. During the battle, it is revealed that Luffy has Conqueror's Haki. Luffy proves himself to be an actual good guy, shattering Hancock's expectations of him, which later leads to her falling in love with him. Later on, Luffy learns from Hancock about her backstory, her reasons for hating men, and all of the troubles that her and her sister went through in their past at the hands of the Celestial Dragons. Once things begin to settle down, Luffy learns that Ace was captured by Blackbeard and will be publicly executed at Marineford. He asks Hancock for help, she agrees, and they go to Impel Down, the world's most secure prison.
Now we move on to Impel Down, which covers chapters 525 to 549. They arrive to Impel Down. Hancock sneaks Luffy in and he begins his infiltration, all the way down to level 6 where Ace is being held. During his ventures through the prison, Luffy teams up with former enemies and new characters along the way. At some point, they would come across the prison warden Magellan, who Luffy loses to. He throws Luffy in level 5 to die, but they are saved by Inazuma, who introduces them to Ivankov, a member of the Revolutionary Army. Ivankov saves Luffy and discovers he is the son of Dragon and decides to help him. Luffy makes it to level 6 only to find Ace has already been taken away to Marineford, but he meets Jinbei, who joins him in escaping to save Ace. Blackbeard invades Impel Down during the Luffy escape, but Magellan frees Shiryu to help him control the chaos, but he turns on them. Luffy soon encounters Blackbeard again and learns he was Blackbeard's original target, but had his place taken by Ace instead. Hearing this, it enrages Luffy, and he attempts to fight Blackbeard, but is stopped by Jinbei, and they continue their escape. Blackbeard runs into Magellan and is poisoned, but then saved by Shiryu, and continues down to level 6. Luffy's group escapes with a marine ship and is saved by Bon Clay, who opens the Gate of Justice, allowing them to escape to Marineford.
Now we have entered the climax of the Summit War saga with the arc Marineford, chapters 550 to 580. Continuing from Impel Down, we now enter the climax where the story has been building up to since entering the Grand Line. We start off the arc with the world in waiting for the results of the war. We see the entire lineup on the Marine side, and at the same time, during all of this, Sengoku reveals that Ace is the son of Gold D. Roger, the king of the pirates. At this time, Garp walks up to the podium and sits next to Ace and begins to cry, reflecting on his final conversation with Roger. A conversation where Roger asks Garp to take in Ace, knowing he will be killed by the Marines just because he is his son. Not long after, the Whitebeard forces appear, and the war starts off with a tidal wave created by Whitebeard, who has the Gura Gura no Mi, a devil fruit that can create earthquakes. The battle begins, and we see Whitebeard's top commanders in action. After a while into the battle, Luffy's group arrives, falling from the sky along with their battleship, making a big scene when they enter the war. Luffy then meets Whitebeard, and to everyone's shock, they are surprised at the way Luffy is speaking to this legend, as if he doesn't care who this guy is. But of course he doesn't, that is Luffy. At some point, Whitebeard begins to respect Luffy and sees what he is capable of, even going so far as to order his men to protect him. Deep into this war, everyone then discovers that Luffy can use Conqueror's Haki. Something else interesting is that Mihawk also addresses that Luffy holds the greatest power, that being the ability to draw people towards him. After making it deep into Marine territory, Luffy then crosses paths with each of the admirals, but soon finds himself overwhelmed. A lot more chaos goes down, with Whitebeard's forces fighting against the warlords and other forces in the Marines, with all of these big matchups occurring. We then have a moment where Luffy gets past Kobe, who tries to stop him and then makes his way up to the platform to go and save Ace, but then Garp comes in his way. In a dire moment of inner conflict, Garp lets Luffy hit him to everyone's shock, and then Luffy goes on to free Ace, thanks to the assistance of Mr. 3, who creates a wax key, and the two begin their escape. As they escape, Whitebeard stays behind and orders the retreat of his crew, saying that no ship will carry him into the new era. While the Whitebeard pirates are escaping, Akainu talks badly about Whitebeard. Ace doesn't like this, which results in Ace turning around and trying to confront Akainu, so that he takes back what he said about Whitebeard. During this moment, Luffy gets distracted and loses his Viva card and tries to retrieve it. Not paying attention, Akainu is about to kill Luffy, taking advantage of this moment. However, before Akainu has a chance to reach Luffy, Ace steps in the way and takes the hit for Luffy, which results in his death. Ace shares his final words with Luffy and dies with a smile on his face, something that we know each of the D-Clan members to do in their moment right before they die. After Ace dies, Luffy goes into a shock and passes out. Akainu attempts to kill Luffy again, but then he is saved by Jinbei and the other Whitebeard pirate commanders, and soon after, Law. At the climax of the war, Blackbeard then makes his grand appearance, kills Whitebeard, who then declares right as he passes that the One Piece is real for the entire world to hear. Blackbeard then takes Whitebeard's powers and begins wreaking havoc. Kobe steps in to stop Akainu from his onslaught, but is about to be killed by Akainu, and then at the last second, Kobe is saved by Shanks, who appears to end the war, taking both Ace and Whitebeard's body with him. The war is over, the Marines have won.
Next up, we have the small post-war arc, which covers chapters 581 to 597. The world begins to get reshaped with the results of Marineford. The world government makes changes to the warlord system, Whitebeard's territories have been taken over, and Luffy awakes to the realization of Ace's death. This is when the ASL flashback starts, which is between 582 and 589. In this flashback, we see Luffy 10 years in the past, and see how he meets Ace, and another boy named Sabo, and we also meet new characters such as the Don, a bandit who raises Luffy at Garp's request. Throughout the flashback, we see how Luffy's relationship goes with the two boys, and they all eventually become brothers through exchanging drinks. However, for family reasons, Sabo runs away from home and sails out to the sea, but is attacked by a celestial dragon and has his ship blown up. Luffy and Ace are sad by this news, but vow to become stronger from it. Coming out of the flashback, Luffy realizes he's still too weak to protect anyone, but Jinbei talks him out of his depression and reminds him of his crew. Rayleigh arrives and offers to train Luffy to teach him how to use haki. They later return to Marineford for Luffy to deliver the 3D 2i message to the other Straw Hats. This message being that instead of meeting in 3 days, they would meet in 2 years, giving them all the time to get stronger before sailing for the New World. Zoro begs Mihawk to train him, while the others begin their own ways to improve themselves. Now we are in the Fishman Island saga. This starts with the Return to Sabaody arc, which covers chapters 598 to 602. The crew reunites, the fake Straw Hats appear, and the monster trio show how far they've grown. Rayleigh cries at Luffy's departure, and flashbacks to the day he met Roger, revealing he was the one who originally owned the Straw Hat.
Now, after being their destination all the way back in Thriller Bark, the crew finally make their way to Fishman Island, chapters 603 to 653. The theme for this arc is fighting for freedom and liberty against oppression and a battle against discrimination. The crew finally arrives to Fishman Island and they meet members of the new Fishman Pirates and are given the options to either join this crew or be sunk. Of course, they ignore this and escape to Fishman Island. Later, we find out that the new Fishman Pirates are being led by a guy named Hody Jones, who plans to cause a revolution by taking over Fishman Island and spreading their anti-human philosophy. This group was, of course, inspired by Arlong, the main antagonist all the way back in the Arlong Park saga. The two main antagonists of this arc is Vanderdecken and Hody Jones, who form an alliance to overthrow the kingdom. As the arc continues, Luffy meets Shirahoshi, the mermaid princess, and takes her to her mother's grave, and in this process, reunites with Jinbei for the first time since the end of the war. Jinbei then begins to tell the history of Fisher Tiger to the Straw Hats, as well as Queen Otohime, Shirahoshi's mother. We now enter the Fisher Tiger and Otohime flashback, chapters 620 to 627. In this flashback, we see the infamous Fisher Tiger, a person who was name-dropped all the way back at Amazon Lily, the same guy who committed the crime of freeing the slaves from the Celestial Dragon's homeland, Marijua, who later goes on to form the Sun Pirates to provide hope for the future of the Fishman race. We also see in this flashback that Jinbei had a shared history with Arlong, the two actually being so close to where they were, in a way, brothers. During their travels on the Sun Pirate crew, they meet a little girl named Koala, who joins the crew so that they can return her to her home. This little girl, at one point, was a slave to the Celestial Dragons, who was also freed at the time Fisher Tiger had freed all of the other slaves. When first boarding the crew, the Fishman Pirates clearly saw that there was something wrong with Koala. She clearly was traumatized due to her experience of being a slave in the Holy Land. But at some point, they begin to have her come around, and she actually begins to show true emotions, a real smile, and actually befriends members on the crew. After she is returned home, we see that Fisher Tiger was betrayed by the very humans who he returned Koala to, as well as the rest of his crew is attacked by the Marines. Fisher Tiger manages to escape, but dies from his injuries and refuses to take the human blood that would have saved his life. He tells his Fishman brothers not to let their personal hatred spread to the next generation. After all this, we also get information on Jinbei becoming a warlord and how his actions led to the situation that resulted in Arlong going to the East Blue and causing the hardships that Nami had to go through in her life. Throughout the flashback, we also get to see Shirahoshi's mother, Queen Otohime. Her goals in this flashback were for the unification of the Fishman race and the human race, so that the Fishman could one day live on the surface. There have been multiple attempts of her trying to convince the citizens of Fishman Island, teaching the younger generation of the world above the sea to one day make this dream a reality. Then one day, a ship boarding a celestial dragon crashes onto Fishman Island. We see Queen Otohime even goes so far as to save the life of this celestial dragon. This eventually leads to her getting the opportunity to better the Fishman relationship with humans. Things finally begin to start going well for Otohime and the goals that she is trying to achieve. But before she has a chance to really fulfill them, she is soon assassinated by Hody Jones, who puts the blame on humans.
Back in the current timeline, Hody's group captures the royal family and begins the revolution. Luffy and Jinbei fight due to a disagreement on how to handle the situation, but quickly resolve it. They return to defeat Hody's forces, where the Straw Hats reveal some new skills learned over the time skip to defeat Hody's forces. Shirahoshi uses her powers to control the Sea Kings and have them stop the Noah from crashing into Fishman Island. Jinbei offers his blood to save Luffy and is asked to join the crew. At the end of the arc, the crew celebrates their victory, and we get major reveals. Shirahoshi is the ancient weapon Poseidon. Akainu and Aokiji fight for 10 days on a certain island, with Akainu becoming the new fleet admiral of the Marines. Blackbeard conquered Whitebeard's territories and became a member of the Yonko, and has been going around hunting down Devil Fruit users and stealing their powers. The Big Mom pirates, Peckhams and Tamago, arrive to collect Big Mom's candy tax. However, Luffy tells Big Mom he ate the candy and tells her that he will defeat her and take Fishman Island as his territory. The crew depart for Fishman Island, except without Jinbei, who says he has business to take care of before officially joining. They now head for the New World. We have now entered the Dressrosa saga, which starts with the arc Punk Hazard, which covers chapters 654 to 699. The Straw Hats finally arrive in the New World. They receive a distress call for help and decide to go to the origin of the signal, Punk Hazard. Smoker also intercepts the signal and makes his way there to capture Luffy. After arriving, they split into two groups. One runs into a dragon on the fiery side of the island, while the other half are captured and brought to the ice side of the island. At some point, we discovered that the reason for the island's terrain being half hot and half cold is because this was the battlefield for Akainu and Aokiji's 10-day fight. They discover the children who are being experimented on by Caesar and meet Kiriman, who upon meeting had his body dissembled by the current warlord Trafalgar D. Waterlaw. Law and Smoker fight, resulting in him removing Smoker's heart and swapping bodies with Tashigi, as well as several members of the Straw Hats. Luffy and Law meet and offer to form an alliance with him in order to take down one of the emperors of the sea, Kaido. We discover Caesar has been working for Doflamingo, creating artificial devil fruits and then selling them to Kaido. Law's plan is to put a stop to this by capturing Caesar. Caesar is revealed to be a Logia and captures the crew, Law, and Smoker. They make an alliance and escape, but Caesar reveals his creation, Smiley. Caesar plans to use his pet Smiley to destroy the island. Law and Smoker fight Virgo. Luffy then meets Momonosuke while on his way to fight Caesar. Momo is revealed to have eaten an artificial devil fruit made by Dr. Vegapunk. Caesar is defeated and they make their way to Dressrosa. Later, Law calls Doflamingo to make a deal with him to quit the warlords in return for Caesar Clown. Doflamingo arrives to Punk Hazard and defeats Smoker, but is stopped from killing him by Aokiji. Doflamingo hints that Aokiji has not been involved with good news since leaving the Marines. The arc ends with the crew receiving news that Doflamingo has resigned and the news that Luffy and Law are in an alliance.
Now we enter the big build-up of the Dressrosa saga with the arc Dressrosa itself, chapters 700 to 802. The themes for this arc being false reality. After sailing from Punk Hazard, the Straw Hats arrive to Dressrosa and follow Law's plans to destroy the Smile Fruit Factory. They split into separate groups. Law's group goes to Greenbit to deliver Caesar to Doflamingo, while Luffy's group searches for the factory. They unknowingly cross paths with a new Marine Admiral by the name of Fujitora. Then later, after all of this, Luffy discovers that Doflamingo is holding a battle tournament with the prize being Ace's Devil Fruit, the Mera no Mi. Hearing the news, Luffy enters the tournament to get his brother's Devil Fruit back. Throughout this tournament, we meet many different characters and even returning ones such as Jesus Burgess of the Blackbeard Pirates, who is revealed to be the 2nd Division commander of Blackbeard's fleet. At one point during the tournament, Luffy actually has a brief conversation with Blackbeard on the Din Din Mushi. Blackbeard tells Luffy that he will take Ace's fruit for his crew. Later, after discovering that his crew needs him, Luffy leaves with Zoro and Kinemon after finding out and reuniting with his brother Sabo, who Luffy thought was long dead. Luffy entrusts him with winning the Mera no Mi, and in the final battle of the tournament, Sabo takes the fruit and eats it, gaining Ace's powers. As all of this goes on, Law fights against both Doflamingo and Admiral Fujitora, who declares that he is definitely in an alliance with Luffy and has his warlord status revoked due to this. At this time, Doflamingo and Fujitora are about to capture Law, and Doflamingo gives us history on how the world government is formed. We then go on to have a moment where Doflamingo briefly clashes with Sanji. Eventually, Sanji and half of the crew leave with Momonosuke and Caesar and head for the island of Zou at Luffy's command.
Usopp, Frankie, and Robin meet the Tontadas. Frankie heads to the factory. Usopp and Robin infiltrate the underground port to defeat Sugar. After some trouble, Usopp succeeds in saving everyone, including members from the tournament, who all choose to aid Luffy's group as thanks for being saved and wanting revenge on Doflamingo. At some point, Doflamingo activates the birdcage. Doflamingo then starts a bounty game to capture several individuals who have hindered his plans. Sabo and Fujitora clash. Luffy's group takes on Doflamingo's generals, clearing a path for Luffy to get to the top of the plateau and fight Doflamingo. We find out from Law that his real plan was to always take down Doflamingo. We learn the reason for this is because of a shared history between Law and Doflamingo that's shown in their backstory cover in chapters 761 to 767. It should also be mentioned that prior to the start of this backstory between the two, we learned from Doflamingo that Law's devil fruit, the Op no Mi, has the potential to perform what is known as the immortality surgery. This grants the subject immortality at the cost of the surgeon's life. We then begin to learn more of Law's backstory in this arc and his relationship with Doflamingo and how he came to get his fruit. Law as a child contracted an illness known as Amber-Led syndrome, as well as many citizens of the country he lived in. The world government's solution to this was to commit an act of genocide on the country, but Law managed to escape and one day found himself trying to join the Don Quixote family led by Doflamingo, and soon developed a strong relationship with Doflamingo's brother Rosinante. One day, Rosinante heard that Law's name was a member of the D-Clan. After discovering this, he took Law and left the crew, knowing Doflamingo would kill Law if he made the discovery. While away, Rosinante Rosinante looks for any way to cure Law's disease with no success, until he discovers a trade is going to happen involving the OPOP fruit, which Law could use to cure his own illness. The events that would transpire led to Law eating the devil fruit, but at the cost of Rosinante's life, who was killed by Doflamingo when the latter discovered his brother was a secret marine agent. Since then, Law has vowed revenge for Corazon. At the same time, we also get to take a look into Doflamingo's backstory and how his family were at one point celestial dragons who left the Holy Land to live amongst the common folk. However, ignorant of the common citizens' hatred for celestial dragons, Doflamingo's life quickly took a turn for the worse, with his family consistently being hunted, his mother passing away from an illness, and being tortured by the common people. All of this driving Doflamingo to the breaking point of activating his conqueror's haki, and not long after killing his own father, blaming him for everything that happened, and eventually going on to become the man he is today. Luffy's group takes on all of Doflamingo's top men. Heroes, who was turned back to a human, challenges Diamante, Frankie vs. Senior Pink, Zoro vs. Pika. Law and Luffy then make it to the plateau and fight Bellamy, Treble, and Doflamingo. Frankie, Tontadas, and Coliseum fighters and other factions work together to stop the birdcage. While Luffy was busy with Bellamy, Law gets defeated by Doflamingo, but Luffy saves Law and fights Doflamingo, at some point revealing his new form Gear 4th, briefly overwhelming him, but soon he runs out of haki and is helpless. Luffy is rescued by civilians and other pirates to keep him away from Doflamingo. Sabo saves Luffy from Burgess, who shifted his focus from the Mera to instead stealing the Gomu Gomu. Luffy recovers, goes back to Gear 4th, and defeats Doflamingo with a King Kong gun. Fujitora issues a public apology to King Riku and exposes the world government's mistake for all to see. This being an issue because other pirates came and fixed the world government's problem rather than the Marines fixing it themselves. Sabo finishes his investigation, visits Luffy's group before departing, and then there's a flashback of Sabo regaining his memories. This is also the debut of Kaido, who falls off of Sky Island onto the headquarters of Kids Alliance. The other half of the Straw Hats make it to Zou. Law speaks with Sengoku about the D-Clan. Luffy reunites Rebecca with Kiros, clashes with Fujitora, escapes Dressrosa and company, and the Straw Hat Grand Fleet is formed and the rest of the crew head for Zou. Now we are on to Zou, which covers chapters 802 to 824. The theme for this arc is loyalty. An example would be Minks being loyal to the Kazuki, sacrificing themselves for Raizo, and Sanji's loyalty to Luffy. After defeating Doflamingo, the crew make their way to Zou, an island that is actually a giant moving elephant. The first half who arrive discover that the city on the island is in ruins and that the citizen Minks are injured due to a previous visit by the Beast Pirates led by Jack, who came looking for Raizo. Sanji and company aid the citizens. Jack left because he heard of Doflamingo's defeat and went to capture him from the Marines, but he gets bodied by Fujitora, Sengoku, and Tsuru. Sanji has Caesar create a cure for his weapon, used on the Minks to save the Minks. Capone arrives and takes Sanji with him because he is to wed one of Big Mom's daughters. Bay shoots Peckham's and takes Sanji away. Luffy's group arrives and we find out that Raizo is safe. The group is brought to Raizo's location and discover the rope poneglyph, and they discover that they need all 4 of the rope poneglyphs to find the island Laugh Tale where the One Piece resides. We learn from Kinemon about their situation and that Kaido is in Wano, and he begs Luffy for help. Luffy refuses, saying it needs to be Momo who asks him since he is the face of the group. Momo begs Luffy and Luffy agrees. Nekomamushi says he will go and find Marco to help. Jack returns and attacks the island but is defeated by Zunisha, who was ordered by Momo to stop him. Luffy, Nami, Brook, Chopper, Carrot, Pedro, and Peckhams go to Tato Land to rescue Sanji, while the other Straw Hats make their way to Wano.
After the brief stop that was the Zou arc, we now move on to Whole Cake Island, chapters 825 to 902. The theme for this arc would be sacrifice. An example for this, for instance, would be Sanji sacrificing himself in order to save not only his crew, but his adopted father, Zeph. Another example would be Pedro, who sacrifices himself so that the Straw Hats can get away. Katakuri, who sacrifices his self-image of what people think of him to where he no longer cares and just wants to focus on his match with Luffy. Upon arrival into Tatoland territory, Luffy's group encounters Reiju and Yonji, Sanji's older sister and younger brother. Reiju saves Luffy by removing the poison from his body that he gets from eating a certain fish. They soon part ways, then Luffy's crew arrive on Cacao Island, where they soon meet Pudding, the woman who Sanji is going to be married to. Pudding gives the crew a secret route to take to Whole Cake Island, and they use it and arrive to the seducing woods, eventually encountering Brule and Cracker, 2 of Big Mom's children, one of which is one of her top generals. During this, Carrot and Chopper get thrown into the mirror dimension. Luffy and Nami fight Cracker and defeat him, while Peggams gets captured by Capone, and Brook and Pedro go to look for Big Mom's rope poneglyph. After an 11-hour fight, Luffy and Nami defeat Cracker, which soon leads to Big Mom sending out her army to go and capture the duo. At this time, Sanji is reunited with his family, the Vinsmokes, who we discover that he actually really hates due to having a traumatic past. Not long after, we discover information about Sanji's father, Vinsmoke Judge, and his ties to the great Dr. Vegapunk. Moving from this important reveal, we go into a second Sanji flashback, showing us his true origins, covered in chapters 840 to 841. Here we learn that since they were children, Sanji and his siblings were genetically modified superhumans, while Sanji himself wasn't born with any of these supernatural traits. We learn this because of the actions of Sanji's mother Sora, who took it upon herself to take poison in order to sabotage Judge's plans for the children. Unfortunately, being the only quote-unquote normal one of the group, this would lead to Sanji being on the receiving end of constant bullying from his stronger siblings, all with the exception of his older sister Reiju, who behind closed doors was actually very nice to Sanji, but never in front of the others because she didn't want the same treatment as him. Eventually, Judge would go on to fake Sanji's death and have him be secretly locked away, never to be seen again. Over time, Sanji's brothers would learn the truth and secretly torture him until one day his sister helps him escape, and even Judge, discovering this, allows Sanji to leave, not caring what would happen to him, and even goes on to disown him. After arriving in East Blue, Reiju then helps Sanji escape. It is then we go back into the present time, after learning even more about Sanji's backstory. Back in the current time, we see that Jinbei arrives to Whole Cake Island, saving the island from Big Mom's hunger pains, and tells Big Mom that he wishes to leave her crew. During this, Luffy reunites with Sanji, only to be told that Sanji is not coming back by Sanji himself. Then a brief scuffle between the two occurs, where pretty much it's a one-sided fight because Luffy refuses to fight back against Sanji. After receiving constant kicks from Sanji, who keeps telling him that he won't return, Luffy declares to Sanji that he is not going anywhere and won't even eat until Sanji comes back to join the crew, because in Luffy's words, he cannot become the Pirate King without Sanji. After Sanji and his family leave, Luffy and Nami are then captured by the Big Mom pirates. Chopper and Carrick are captured by Brûlé, and Brook finds several poneglyphs that belong to Big Mom, one of which being the road poneglyph. And then right after, fights Big Mom herself, but is soon captured after being defeated. Jinbei soon later arrives to Luffy and Nami's location and frees them. After Luffy escapes, he returns to the spot he was at, previously waiting for Sanji. The other group returns to the Mirror World, using it to go and save Brook from Big Mom, who reveals that he actually got the rubbing of all three of Big Mom's poneglyphs.
Sanji discovers the truth about Pudding and Big Mom's plan to kill him and the Vinsmokes so that Big Mom can take control of Germa's technology. He returns to Luffy, feeds him, and says that he wants to return, but he can't yet due to Zeph being a hostage as well as his family if Sanji doesn't comply. They decide to come up with a plan to crash the wedding with Capone Beige, who wants to assassinate Big Mom. The wedding begins. This is also when we get the introduction of Katakuri and the reveal of Future Sight, and we also get the mention of Mother Caramel. The Straw Hats crash the wedding. Jinbei announces he will be joining the future Pirate King. Brook smashes Mother Caramel's picture, and Big Mom goes into panic mode. Enter the Big Mom flashback, which is chapters 866 to 868. Here we see the history of how Big Mom came to be hated by the Giants because she killed one of their leaders during one of her hunger pains. Then, on her birthday, without paying attention, eats her foster mom, Mother Caramel, and the kids of the orphanage. She later goes on to become a pirate. The assassination fails, and then everyone begins to retreat. Luffy has a very brief clash with Big Mom, and then there's large explosions that happen, and this destroys Big Mom's castle. She goes into another hunger pain for wedding cake. Pudding asks Sanji to help make a new cake to save the citizens of Encanto Land. The crew make it to the Sunny to find Katakuri is waiting for them. Luffy and Katakuri go to the Mirror World and begin their fight, while the rest of the Straw Hats continue their escape. Pedro sacrifices himself to allow the others to get away. Luffy continues to fight Katakuri, wanting to learn how to do Future Sight as well. Eventually, Katakuri's face is revealed. Him and Luffy start round 2, and he gains Katakuri's respect. Luffy activates Snake Man. Katakuri falls on his back and admits defeat, allowing Luffy to escape.
It is then here that we get this very brief moment after their fight, where we learn of Katakuri's very short backstory. Here we see that Katakuri as a child was picked on a lot for how his mouth looked, and would constantly get into fights because of this. One day, the people who Katakuri beat up injured his sister Brûlé as a way to get revenge on him. Since then, Katakuri would go on to seek revenge, as well as cover up his mouth to become the quote-unquote perfect brother that his siblings would eventually go on to admire.
During the fight, Sanji and Puddin finish the wedding cake and deliver it to Big Mom. Luffy is saved by Peckham's and Sanji. The Straw Hat escape thanks to Big Mom pirates being delayed by Germa and the Sun Pirates. Luffy tells Jinbei to make sure he comes to Wano at all costs. Sanji discovers he has his own raid suit now, and Big News Morgan reports the events of Whole Cake Island, leading to Luffy being called the 5th Emperor of the Sea and increasing his bounty to 1.5 billion. Now we're on to the Reverie arc, which consists of chapters 902 to 908. Kobe revealed to now be a captain, gathering all the king and queens allied with the world government. Dragon calls for the revolutionary commanders to be gathered together to make their plans on declaring war on the celestial dragons. Fujitora speaks with the Green Bull about crashing the meeting. Sabo and several commanders invade Marizawa. Vivi, Shirahoshi, and Rebecca meet and talk about Luffy, and we also get the return of other characters from past arcs. Big Mom tells Kaido she's coming to Wano, and this is the first mention of rocks, and we also see the empty throne. Shirahoshi is saved from Charlos by the celestial dragon saved by her mother during the Fishman Island flashback, who was another member of the Don Quixote family. Rob Lucci and other members of CP0 appear. Shanks meets with the Gorosei, and Kuma is revealed to now be a slave of the Celestial Dragons, and he has some connection with Bonnie that is teased during this arc as well. Sabo is angered by seeing Kuma this way, and he wants to save him. The kings and queens all meet, and the Gorosei mention the Great Cleansing, and we see Imu looking at the picture of Luffy, Blackbeard, Shirahoshi, and Vivi. He then proceeds to sit on the empty throne, and is asked who is the next light to be erased from the world. And finally, we are here in the current arc of Wano Country. This started at chapter 909, and of course is ongoing. The themes for this arc is betrayal and mistaken identity. First, we'll start with Act 1. Nekomamushi visits Marcos at Whitebeard's home village on Sphinx Island to recruit him to the Alliance. We see what the Straw Hats who didn't participate in rescuing Sanji are up to on Wano. The remaining Straw Hats with Luffy and company arrive in Wano, but end up getting separated. Luffy washes ashore and meets Tama. Tama then reveals she has the Kibi Kibi no Mi devil fruit, which allows her to pluck Kibi Daggos from her cheeks to put animals under her command. Luffy goes on to witness a situation where we learn many of Wano's citizens are starving. We discover that Kaido has built weapons factories on the mainland, which has poisoned Wano's waters. Tama is also one of these victims, and Luffy is told that she has been awaiting the return of Ace, who visited Wano 2 years prior. Luffy tells Tama that Ace has died, but she can't accept this news. Luffy decides to bring a sick Tama to find a doctor. During this, we briefly learn of Tama's past with Ace, and not long after, Luffy reunites with Zoro. The duo briefly cross paths with Virgil Hawkins, who is now a member of Kaido's crew. The two escape Hawkins and meet Kiku and later rescue Tama, who had been kidnapped by the Beast Pirates. Luffy reunites with the other crew members, and they learn the truth from Kinemon about coming from the future and the story of Odin. A drunk Kaido gets news that Luffy and Law are in Wano, and we get the reveal that Kaido has a Zoan devil fruit that turns him into a dragon. Luffy, thinking his crew is dead, goes after Kaido while Law fails to stop him. Luffy fights Kaido but is defeated very easily. Then Luffy gets thrown at Udon right next to Eustace Captain Kidd. Act 1 ends. At this point we get intermission chapters. This was chapter 925. We see Gecko Moria attacking Blackbeard's headquarters on the island Hachinosu, and Gecko is in search of Absalon. Moria lost contact with him after going to spy on Blackbeard. He learns that Absalon has been killed, and his devil fruit is now in possession of Shiryu, the commander of Blackbeard's 1st Division. Blackbeard also tells us on the 4th day of the reverie that Sabo and the revolutionary commanders made a rescue attempt on Kuma and clashed with Admirals Green Bull and Fujitora in the process. We also get the introduction of King the Wildfire and Jack the Plague, 2 more of Kaido's top 3 men.
Now we move on to Act 2, chapters 925 to 955. Throughout this act, we see Luffy works in Udon alongside Kid, who are both prisoners. Luffy soon meets Hyogoro in this prison, who teaches him how to use advanced armament haki, or what the fanbase calls Rio. We then get the debut of Orochi, the Shogun of Wano, and discover that CP0 is here as well, and that they have been making negotiations with Orochi. Big Mom arrives to Wano, but gets knocked down the waterfall by King, and soon catches amnesia because of this. At one point during the act, Law discovers that his crew has been captured by Virgil Hawkins, and in exchange for the freedom of his crew, turns himself in. We also get the reveal that Orochi has a devil fruit called the Yamato no Orochi, a mythical Zoan, who attempts to attack Hiyori, but her death is faked by Denjiro. Hiyori tries to escape, but is chased after by Kamazo, aka Killer. Zoro saves Hiyori, and soon defeats Killer. During all of this, we see what the other Straw Hats are up to in preparation for the big battle. We get Sanji versus Page 1 with the reveal of Sanji's raid suit, which gives him the powers to turn invisible, as well as other boosted stats. The Alliance is nearly discovered, but covered up by Yasue at the cost of his life at the hands of Orochi. Big Mom, who still has a case of amnesia, arrives to Udon prison, but is soon knocked out by Queen and brought to Kaido's headquarters. While Queen is away, Luffy's group takes over the prison without him knowing. At the end of the act, we see that Zoro acquires Odin's sword, Enma, and begins to train with it in the coming days for the war. We see that Law is freed by a mysterious figure who we later learn was X-Drake. And to wrap things up, Big Mom and Kaido, who have been in a fight over the last few days, have now made an alliance Now we enter the intermission for Act 2, going on to Act 3, covering chapters 956 and 957. Here we get some major reveals. We find out from Big News Morgans that during the reverie, it's been reported that there has been a death and an attempted murder. With this news going out across the world, we see the reactions of Dragon, leader of the Revolutionary Army, as well as the reaction of Koala, Ivankov, and the Revolutionary Commanders. We also discover that, to the cheers of the citizens across the world, the warlord system has been disbanded and replaced with Vegapunk's SSG, which is something that Admiral Fujitora has been trying to do since its introduction in the Dressrosa arc. This leads to the Marines attempting to arrest each of the remaining warlords. We also get the reveal of a secret Marine faction called Sword, which Kobe and X-Drake are members of. And if things weren't already crazy enough, we then get the big reveal of the Yonko bounties as well as Gold Rogers. And to finish off all of this exciting news, we then learn about the lore of the Rocks pirates and the first mentions of God Valley, and even some brief history between Rocks, Garp, and Roger himself. Now we move on to Act 3, starting at chapter 958, and is currently ongoing as we speak. The day has finally arrived for the big attack on Onigashima, Kaido's HQ. Kimon and the Scabbards arrive to the meeting spot for the Alliance to begin the raid, only to discover that their allies have not arrived yet. In this moment of despair, Kinemon calls on the Denden Mushi for his allies as we fade into the Oden flashback, covering chapters 960 to 973. Here we get to finally see the journey of Oden with our own eyes, from his early days of meeting Kinemon and the other Scabbards, to meeting Whitebeard and joining his crew, but we even see some really cool moments with Gold D. Roger, as well as Oden joining Roger on his final voyage that led to Roger becoming the Pirate King. After this voyage, Roger then goes on to disband the Roger Pirates, and Oden returns to Wano. The second half of this flashback involves Oden returning home over the course of 5 years, being there dealing with Orochi and Kaido's tyranny. We then lead up to the final moments of Oden's life during the Hour of Legends, and the flashback ending off with Toki's prophecy of Wano one day being liberated.
Now we're back in the current timeline. Kanjiro reveals he is a traitor to the Alliance and kidnaps Momo. The Straw Hats and the entire Alliance soon arrive with Jinbei, not long after, who officially joins the Straw Hats. The Alliance then sneaks into Onigashima as Luffy, Zoro, Kid, and Killer cause commotion. Luffy soon meets Yamato, the child of Kaido, and they hear Kaido and Big Mom's plans to find the ancient weapons and claim the One Piece. During this meeting, Kaido beheads Orochi, seemingly killing him. Then the Onigashima raid begins. Kaido and the Scabbards go to the roof to battle, while Luffy begins to make his way up to the top of Onigashima. Nekomamushi and Izo arrive to Wano with Marco, who knocks the Big Mom pirates back down the waterfall when they tried to get up to Onigashima as well. Kaido defeats the Scabbards and then lifts the island as he plans to drop it onto the capital of Wano. Luffy, Zoro, Law, Kid, and Killer arrive to the rooftop at this point. Roof Peace begins with an epic battle between Kaido and Big Mom versus the 5 Supernova on the roof. As the Battle of the Roof is underway, the Straw Hats face off against the Beast Pirate Generals. Tama arrives at Onigashima and uses her Devil Fruit to change the tides of the battle. At this point, Zoro uses Ashura and he scars Kaido, and the fight eventually turns into a 1v1 with Luffy versus Kaido. But for a second time, Luffy is defeated. This is also when we get the reveal of Conqueror's Haki coding. Back on the live floor, Chopper cures every one of Queen's Ice Oni virus and begins battling Queen for a period of time until Sanji arrives and takes over the fight. At this time, the Scabbards that were defeated earlier get back into the fight after having their wounds treated by an unknown person. Each of the Topi Roppo then begin to go down. Back on Wano, Luffy has been rescued by Law's crew,